very difficult. It's not my default state. I don't know that it's the default state for most people, truthfully. But I'm very often predisposed with thoughts about the future, occasionally thoughts about the past, but it's much more often kind of thoughts about the future and planning and thinking about what I need to do and what do I want to do next, and never really being satisfied with anything that's happening in the moment. So I have to work hard to kind of overcome those things. And I'm sure you can appreciate this, but when you are present, you generally are in a much better frame of mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's an interesting study. I think it was initially published by Dan Gilbert's lab, one of these long-term happiness studies that was published in Science magazine that pinged people for their level of happiness, unhappiness, presence, or lack of presence multiple times throughout the day. This was in the early years of smartphones. So this is around 2010, 2011. So the technology wasn't as good as it is now, but it was good enough to do this in a very large number of people. I forget how many, but it's certainly more than 10,000. And that number is, I'm stating it intentionally low. And what they found was, regardless of whether or not people were doing something they enjoyed or not, boring to them or not, the degree of presence to what they were doing was a stronger predictor of their happiness in that moment and overall than was anything else. And also a fairly rare feature for most people. So it seems like it's something that we do need to work at, perhaps nowadays, as you point out, more than we perhaps had to in our ancestral past. I'm a little bit surprised that you say that you find it hard to be present, because you strike me as somebody that is not just willing, but has a strong almost reflex toward, drilling in, observing the contour or something and then really drilling into it and really getting to the guts of most everything that interests you. So you strike me as somebody who's very present. And I guess that maybe this gets back to this.
But they're not mutually exclusive, right? I mean, I think, so for example, I'll notice that sometimes if I'm playing with my kids, especially my boys because they're younger, right? And playing with them is really being in their world. Like if I'm with my daughter, we can be doing things that are kind of mutually, like, we'll do things together that I would probably do by myself or she would do by herself. But with my boys, it's generally doing something I wouldn't otherwise be doing. And if I'm paying attention to it, I'm constantly amazed at how after 5 minutes of searching through a bin for just the right Lego piece that we want to do to build this one little thing, like my mind will start thinking about something else. Like, oh my God, like I got to go, I didn't email that dude back, and I got to do this, and I got to do this, and I got to do this, and I got to do this. And I just get into the I got to do. And it's like, dude, you've only been here for 5 minutes. Why don't you just find the Lego piece that you need to finish building that thing over there that is this beautiful moment that you're not going to have many of, right? There's a very finite number of these moments you're going to have. So you want to savor every one of them. So again, I don't think I'm alone in that. I think a lot of parents, for example, can relate to that. And that's literally just one of many different things. And by the way, I wouldn't have said that was my greatest challenge either, but it's something that requires, I think, deliberate attention.
What you're alluding to is a challenge with holding a single time perception or perception of time. One of the most remarkable things to me about the human brain is our ability to be present or think about the past or the future or the present and the future. And we can occupy different time bins. And in a recent non-recorded conversation of ours, you showed me something that I've seen before, but for some reason, this time it had a profound impact on me, which is that you have a chart of the number of weeks that you're going to live, and you mark them off 1 week at a time. Mm-hmm. We were talking about this in the context of major life decisions. And it illustrates the fact that we need a chart, such a chart, that we can't really move through our day being present to the beauty of working on a Lego with our kid while also paying attention to the fact that, wow, this is week number, whatever, 600 or X number of weeks of one's life. So that ability to contract and dilate our time perception is marvelous, but it's also a double-edged sword, because it's what takes us out of what's meaningful in the moment. one sort of has to wonder then whether or not our challenges in being present, I guess the psychoanalyst, maybe we need to, or psychiatrist, maybe we need to ask our Paul Conti, who you know and I know and respect greatly, whether or not this is some, subconscious refusal of our own mortality or something, right? That if we were to really contemplate our mortality on a regular basis, not just when we're marking off the weeks of the poster, we wouldn't be able to be present because it's kind of overwhelming, right?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like the literature says that people who spend more time contemplating their own mortality are actually more at peace. Kind of a little bit of the exposure therapy idea. And so I'm not sure it's an unhealthy thing to be aware of your mortality. I suspect it's helpful in as much as you accept it, right? And you feel like you have some agency over parts of it, right? Like I don't think I have nearly enough agency over the length of my life. I think I've got 5 to 10 years of wiggle room that I can extract. If I do all of the things that I've written about in that book, I bet I can stretch my life out 10 to 15 years at the maximum. Call it 10 over what would have happened if I didn't do those things. Maybe it's more, but that it depends on what we're comparing it to, right? From being reasonable to maybe being a little bit, hyper functioning. Maybe it's 10 years. But where I know I have a much greater agency is in quality. And for me now, a big part of that is in terms of quality of relationships. I think that's a big thing. And I think for most people, that's what I hope this chapter does, is it sort of allows more people to kind of take an appraisal of that and ask that question, which is, before it's too late, am I living my life more for my resume virtues or for my eulogy virtues, to borrow from David Brooks's work, The Road to Character, which I talk about as being kind of one of the many aha moments that I had during this journey.
Yeah. And there again, thank you. You recommended The Road to Character to me. I do an annual solo wilderness trip, and I listen to it during the drive to that trip and on that trip. And I would just say it's a truly important book for everyone to listen to.
Yeah.
It's really quite impressive. What are the things that you do on a regular, let's say on a daily basis, to try and enforce, forgive the word, but enforce emotional well-being and health in terms of relationships? Because as you point out, it's not reflexive for everybody, and that doesn't make them bad people. I think it